The Atari 7800 was killed by a micromanager. Hello humans, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Gamer. What has been said about the Atari 7800 and Jack Tramiel and GCC that hasn't already been said? Well, let me tell you guys, this company was very interesting back in the day, right? This gentleman was very interesting. He was very successful. Whatever you want to say about Jack Tramiel, he had success, right? He made money in business, right? But he had the one thing that kills creativity and creates hatred and animosity more than anything else in business and in your everyday life. Having a micromanager. This man was famous for wanting to sign off on anything over $1,000 that the company, any company that he worked for, worked on, because he wanted it to be that much in control. Guys, when it comes to business, when you have a small business, you know, being a micromanager is like hugging a young seedling tree, right? It's very thin. You can put your arms around it very easily. You can just do it with your hands. But as that business grows, eventually becomes a tree, and you're not going to be able to handle it all by yourself. That's what happens to micromanagers. It comes a point where you can't handle it by yourself. One of the biggest frustrations as a business consultant, as a business analyst, that we have is dealing with companies that get to a certain level, single proprietorship a lot of the times, and they want to go to the next level, but they can't let go of anything. They want to be in charge of everything. Oh, we wear many hats. No, you wear many hats because you're afraid of losing money, so you try to be in everything. That's a type of individual. Based on everything that I read about Jack Tramiel, that's the type of individual he was. Doesn't matter what corporation he was on, he really wanted to be hands-on. And if you've ever worked with a micromanager, you know how much you hate it. You know, nobody likes being, looked over. Somebody over your shoulder. Doesn't matter what you do, they're right here. Let me tell you guys, the reason I'm making this video is because as I looked at this story, man, as a business consultant, I rarely get invested in any of the companies that I work with, right? I want them to be qualified, certified, and everything else, and I work towards that, but I'm not emotionally invested in it. When I read the story of the 7800, it hurt my heart. I was like, oh my God, this is shelved for 2 years over a retail price disagreement. If Jack Tramiel had listened to JCC back in the days and released this console, what a different world this would be, right? The PlayStation probably wouldn't even be. They would have gone into business with Nintendo. Remember, Nintendo wanted to partner up with Atari, and if this console had released in 1984, and I'm looking at these games here, can you imagine how different life would have been if we would have had this out in the market in 1984? It would have been a whole different place. Nintendo wouldn't have had the success they had back then, because Atari would have been dominant. Absolutely. They would have ate their lunch. But this is what happens when you're a micromanager. When you have a company come in here and say, okay, this is the project here, it's $150, it's already done. All you got to do is produce it. And you say no to the tune of half the price. There's a difference between saying, oh, I can't sell it for $150, maybe we can do $120, and then you start, massaging the numbers off of there. But at a 50% discount, you're insane. There is no money for JCC, right? And they said it at the time. This is micromanaging at its worst, right? At its worst. Like I told you, there's nothing worse than trying to be a console to somebody who's a micromanager. Let me tell you something, guys. Don't do this in your companies. If you're a micromanager, let me tell you right now, if somebody doesn't hate you right now, they will hate you eventually, because you just have to get things done your way, the way you do them. Let me tell you something, guys. You can hire somebody to do things the way you want them done. But if you need to look over their shoulders 24/7, you hired the wrong person. Right? Sometimes you have to hire people that are beyond your expertise. Right? That's happened to me many times, where I have to tell the client, listen, I appreciate your input. This is not your area of expertise. Let let me handle this. We'll get certified. And then after you're certified, if you want to if you want to trash everything and start over, you go right ahead. But you're paying us. I remember this one client, he was paying us like 30 grand, right, to doing work. And I had written some documents, some technical documents for him. And he's like, no, I think I can do this. And I'm like, I'm trying to be polite to this guy because, at this point, he's worked in this industry for a while, but, he just has a high school education. He has no background in blueprint reading or geometric tolerancing or anything like this, right? And I'm writing technical work instructions for him that he doesn't even understand. And he wants to edit them. And I'm like, trying to tell him politely, like, dude, just get certified, then you can go and burn everything if you want, but you're paying 30 grand here because you can't do it. If not, you wouldn't be paying us this money, right? and this is the type of individual that Jack Trammell was. He was famous for being a micromanager, for being wanting to have control over everything. And it will give you success to a certain point, but eventually it'll catch up to you because something will come up that you don't know what you're doing. This was the case with, JCC Technologies coming to him with this project. They were giving him gold in his hand, but he wanted to control it. He wanted to set the price. He wanted to do everything. And what happened? He shelled it for 2 years. This guy basically had gold in his hand for 2 years, shelled it, and destroyed Atari, right? Destroyed the future of Atari, destroyed future dominance. But it would have ended up the same way anyway, because even if he would have succeeded, the same thing would have happened. He would have gotten to a point where he did, somebody would come up and say, we need to next step, we need to go online. He would have been like, no, I don't understand that. No, there would have been something where it was beyond the privy of his expertise, and then he would have said no. And that's what happens to micromanagers. So learn from it, guys. Learn from it. When I read this, let me tell you guys, I started looking at the games, and I'm experiencing the games now for the very first time. Some of them that I've never looked at from before. I'm looking at such great work a lot of the community has done, for example, with homebrews. And I'm thinking the great potential this machine had back then. Can you imagine having these games back then in 1984? Even, the market crashed, but there would have been a segment. If you only sold at Radio Shack, if you sold direct, if you only had 1 or 2 stores around the country that carried this, eventually more people would come because the product was that good for that time. Right? You were surpassing what ColecoVision had done. You were surpassing what Intellivision had done. You would have been the only game in town. But because the losses have been so big before, the micromanaging set in because it was all about not losing money. He saw himself as a computer company. Video games were dead. And at that point, Nintendo could see nothing was further from the truth. And Nintendo had a different business plan, and you can see the difference in the business plan and how did it work out. Right? Trammell would have never, ever, ever said, take these consoles and if you don't sell them, give them back to me. He never would have said that. Right? He wasn't that kind of manager. But that's what it took to revive the industry. If you look at it from a broader perspective and say, okay, look, some people want this still. Some people, if you had that many sales before with the Atari 2600, obviously there's a lot of people that enjoy video games. Obviously. Right? So all you have to do is capture a portion of those and give them the best product possible, and you have something to move forward on. Not that they didn't have any other successes, but this right here was his biggest miss. And why? Because he was a micromanager. And I'm telling you, as a business consultant, if you ever want to stunt your business, if you want to keep your business from growing, become a micromanager and see what happens. All right, humans, I will catch you on the next one. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you like and subscribe. You want to support the channel? Join if you can. Thank you so much. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.